This podcast is made possible in part by the generous contribution of our Smart Insiders Plus members. If you're not a member, join in now. Just go to smartrecovery.org/insiders.
Hello, and welcome to the Smart Recovery Podcast, where we offer thoughtful conversation about a variety of recovery topics. You'll hear self-empowering and science-based approaches to making changes toward a healthier and more satisfying lifestyle and building a life beyond addiction.
Welcome to the Smart Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Frazier. Today on the podcast, we have a Smart Recovery facilitator. She's involved with women-only meetings online and also has a lot to say about how that meeting can be very productive for people. Loretta Billingsley, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Luke. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your background. I think you're in the media business in some regard.
I am. I started in post-production very early on in that part of the business, and kind of a pioneer that not very many women were doing it at the time. And so in the 80s, I got into the business, kind of went through the ranks, became a junior editor, then an editor, and then just kept pursuing it because I loved it so much. And I still do it to this day. And I've been very happy and very lucky, actually, to do what I love to do.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. I mean, there's a lot of people who just, for whatever reason, feel like they have to accept a certain position, job, pursuit, when really their passion may lay elsewhere. So congratulations. I feel the same way, and good for us.
Really.
So also it's interesting aspect of your work being a pioneer in a regard. You're also a pioneer in the sense of starting a women-only meeting. Can you tell me about some of the history about that and who you worked with to get this started?
Yeah, sure. I can tell you it was about a year ago that we first started the women's meeting. And I think it was a Saturday night women's meeting. And I thought I was ready to do that and take it on with full commitment. And about 3 meetings into it, I realized that I was not, that I had developed a lot of anxiety and a lot of stuff was coming up for me personally. And I recognized that what was most important was my sobriety and my understanding of why I was having this anxiety. So it's Lizzie took it over for about a couple of meetings, and then it sort of went to sleep. Mm-hmm. Then another wonderful participant with Smart Recovery, Kay Kirsten, picked it back up for a Saturday morning meeting. And so she kept it alive, and I'm so grateful to her for doing that. And in September, I got another chance to come back to the 11 a.m. meeting. And so I've been there since.
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't that interesting, too, that because you had to do some self-care, if that's the good term for it.
Exact term.
Good. And so there was the hiatus. It went to sleep for a little while, but there was enough fertile ground that it could easily grow and again. And get back into action.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Change and transformation is an ongoing dynamic process. I think that's probably indicative of what happened with the women's meeting, really.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to kind of the need for a women's meeting because there was enough interest. Was there a lot of interest at first? Has it grown in popularity?
I think that, there's always been interest in it. And there are several reasons for that. But since September, we really have grown the participation. And I think it's for several reasons. Number one, I kind of make it a point to get the word out that, hey, there's a women's meeting. We want you to come. It's a safe and wonderful space to be in. There's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of safety to be vulnerable, to share stories. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really the significant part of it. But the other part of it is not only do we talk about smart recovery, we talk about some parallels with other behavioral sciences with smart recovery. And one of my focuses is teaching and talking about what these other parallels look like with smart recovery, how they are the same, how they are different. And I think that is a real important part of it, because knowing more about our behavior is a big part of recovery. Yes, urges pop up, triggers pop up, but understanding them and really getting down to the nitty gritty of why is really, really important. I think that we can find answers to those whys, not only with the 4-point program in smart recovery, but with other behavioral sciences and actual brain science. So it's kind of a more global sort of feel to recovery.
Well, that's, as you say, an educational piece in combination with a safe space, ability to tell stories, perhaps sensitive stories. And so the mutual support is one element which goes universally through SMART. And
absolutely,
I really like the idea of this education component. And I think you have started having guests for some of your meetings.
Oh, yeah. We've had some very interesting guests. One of them, I think that one of the first ones we had was Dee Wagner, and we talked about parasympathetic system in our bodies and polyvagal theory. And it hit home to a lot of people because it really got in depth in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, shutdown. And
wait a minute, you said that quickly. Flight, freeze, shutdown?
Fight, flight, freeze, shutdown, fawn. Now, shutdown, fawn doesn't get talked about a lot. Usually, mostly it's fight, flight, freeze that gets discussed. But fawn and shutdown are also part of that dynamic. And for me, shutdown was very apparent in my life. And trying to understand those responses is huge, I think, in recovery. So we talked a lot about that, and it was based on Stephen Porges and polyvagal theory. One of the other guests we had was Melanie Greenberg, and I found her by Googling criticism because I felt highly criticized at one point. And so I found her. She wrote a book called The Stress-Proof Brain, and it's CBT based, and it was life-changing for me. And I actually, got in touch with her, and she became my therapist. So it's interesting, how this all evolved. And along those lines, I Googled, is REBT compassionate? And who popped up but Debbie Joffe Ellis, who is the spouse and partner of Albert Ellis. And as a lot of participants know, REBT is one of the cornerstones of smart recovery, and Albert Ellis was the developer of that.
And that's for folks who may not catch, it's REBT is rational emotive behavior therapy. And then closely related CBT, as you mentioned, the cognitive behavioral therapy. Correct. So that's exciting. I mean, someone who is so central to the field. And does she work with her husband in developing theory and practice?
Well, she did. I think he passed away in 2009. And so what she did was continue his legacy. And she really kind of comes from a compassionate perspective. And that's why I like her so much, is because sometimes I felt that REBT felt harsh, felt so cognitive that I would have cognitive overload, and my prefrontal cortex would explode. So I found in her this other aspect to REBT that was much more nourishing for me. And again, has that compassionate point of view. And to do an ABC with compassion in mind has a whole new perspective. And so it's very exciting to see her perform that with, or not perform that, but, to do that with a participant that feels comfortable in doing it. And she's just masterful. She really is.
And that's, I love that you Google is REBT compassionate.
Yeah.
And, it's just interesting how Google can take answer or questions like that and provide a whole host of answers and give you the citations for them.
Sure.
And I love that. And sometimes they have a little box underneath the original answer that adds questions that you might have that are related to your first question. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, then you can really go deep.
No, but I'm going to Google that.
Okay. It's always, there is a phrase GTS, and it stands for Google that stuff.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. So that's what when you're stuck a little bit.
Yeah. But, in finalizing this, on April 23rd, we have an incredible expert coming in, Dr. Anna Lemke, who wrote Dopamine Nation. And Dopamine Nation is really, I think, pivotal in brain science and in trying to understand addiction in the brain. So I'm very, very excited about that. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. The combination, as we spoke of earlier. So tell me what the participants' reaction has been as you've gone along. Have there been really people who have told you that this is something very valuable to them?
Absolutely. In my last meeting, I had asked participants to tell me, how important is this meeting to you? And it's very important. One response was they loved the camaraderie. Mm-hmm. They looked forward to it every week, and I get that a lot. That participants look forward to it every week. I look forward to it every week because it's such a great sharing and connection. Mm-hmm. Talk about connection. I really feel connection in our meeting, and I think everyone else does too. And I think what's really, really nice is that over the months, how all of us recognize the growth in
the growth in each other.
The growth in each other. Yeah, which is wonderful. It's and even if relapse comes into the equation for anyone, that sense of no guilt, no shame, no foul, just a blip on the radar, is exactly where everyone goes.
Yeah.
And
And speaking of relapse, there's the story about when you're driving, for instance, your recovery is driving from Washington, D.C. to Boston, and you get to New York and you have a flat tire. You fix the tire and keep moving. You don't go back to Washington, D.C.
Exactly. Yeah. I kind of do the cross country version from Boston to Chicago to LA.
Okay. So you're on a longer ride.
I'm on the long haul.
You're a road warrior.
Exactly.
I love driving.
Recovery is kind of like road warrior.
Right.
It can be tough. It can be tough. And doing the work is part of this. And I think that, again, in our meeting, that comes up a lot, how everyone is doing their work, bringing it into our meeting and going from there. And I'm going to bring this up because I came up with this the other day in terms of doing our work and how we share and how that works in smart recovery. And I kind of came up with this 4 levels of collective sharing. Mm-hmm. And this is anecdotal, but you never know. I might turn it into a theory.
Okay.
But there's our first experience is our internal experience. And so that's what's going on there. That's where we're doing our work. And then, the next level is direct focused sharing experience. And I think that level, the direct focused sharing experience, is really about what Smart Recovery has done currently, and that is expand meetings to be directly focused with groups. So that would be the women's meetings, LGBTQ meetings, LGBTQ and ally meetings, maladaptive behavior meetings, gay men's meetings, first responders meetings. So that's kind of where there's this direct focus shared experience. Then we go up to another level, which would be level 3. And it's kind of like going up a funnel from the bottom up.
Okay. From more specific to a more general. Is that
exactly? Okay. Exactly. And so now we're going to go up to level 3, which is a more general, and that's kind of like that general discussion meeting with Smart Recovery, where everybody can come into and share where they're coming from. And that's where a lot of sharing can happen, where we've got more of a global idea. But then there's a fourth level. And that's where smart recovery goes into the global domain. And we share about what smart recovery is in the global domain. So it's kind of this leveling that I like. And it really works for me because I think that sometimes there's a disconnect for some participants of, well, why do we have these different meetings? Isn't it isolating? No, not really. If we look at it in terms of these 4 levels of connection, it might make a little bit more sense. It might give a little bit more understanding, and it might also get to a place of acceptance for some people who have kind of some internal traction with it that doesn't work for them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I look at it, this funnel. And it goes in the opposite direction too. It's a 2-way funnel.
Sure. I mean, that's wonderful. That's wonderful, Loretta. It's really understandable. I get it just on the face of it. And then I can sure spend some time thinking more about the depth of it. It really is wonderful. I'm glad you came up with that. And then as you mentioned, the first very specific meeting to the focus meeting, do some of your participants attend different kinds of meetings?
Absolutely. And that's where they go up to level 3 and they go to the other SMART meetings. And I think that that's what's so important to understand is, this is not something where we just stay in level 2 and we stay in our direct focus sharing experience. We bring it up to another level and share it with the kind of SMART global community. And I think that that's what's so wonderful about it, because you go in the opposite direction and we get into my meeting and I hear about their experiences from other meetings and these very valuable lessons that participants have learned in other meetings. So it's that's the 2-way kind of dynamic of this, 4 levels of experience for me.
Yeah. That's Loretta Billingsley. She is a smart recovery facilitator involved with women's meetings and telling us about not only about those meetings, but how participants are reacting and how they got started. And then just laid it out for us on a 4-level analysis. Do you have a title for that analysis?
Oh yeah. 4 levels of collective sharing.
4 levels of collective sharing. I love it. I'm going to look for that in print someday.
Well, we'll see. I'm not an expert, but boy, I sure would like to become one.
But I play one on TV.
There we go. Yeah. It's a hope and a goal.
Have there been any bumps in the road as this women's meeting has gotten started? Were there any concerns that people had?
I don't think for the participants and myself, because it was something that we wanted. But again, I think that there was a sense of, why are we doing this? Why are we getting so focused on specific groups? And it comes back to what I think was just a natural evolution of feeling that inclusivity needed to be a part of the SMART community. And I think that our culture was experienced the need for change from a one-size-fits-all recovery meeting concept that, along with the women's meeting evolution, also, others formed. And I mentioned these before: gay men's meeting, LGBTQ ally meetings, the women's first responders meeting, a trauma-informed meeting called Safe Space, which I love, and a maladaptive behavior meeting, which is another wonderful, wonderful meeting. So it's a humans needs evolution, I think. And I think SMART responded to that brilliantly.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned the larger meetings, which may include people from those more focused meetings.
Absolutely. Level 3.
And you can be sitting next to someone who may be working on a maladaptive behavior, while you yourself have a substance use disorder, or even more specifically, an alcohol use disorder.
Absolutely. I think, and I'm going to steal this from another women's recovery modality. We're all recovering from something.
True.
And it's true. Like, well, that pretty much says it all right there.
Well, I also heard some years ago that when you think about disabilities, we are all only temporarily abled, and that strikes me as so true.
Absolutely. That's a great one. That's
Yeah,
a great one.
and even pardon me.
Stealing.
Steal, for sure. And that even went into the fact that when people wear glasses, that's actually correcting for, you could say, a disability, something that is needs attention. And people don't think of others wearing glasses. And, we look for labeling people with a disability who have a significant and some kind of other disability. So I always thought that was interesting too, to kind of just jar your mind a little bit about what exactly, people are about.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to connection, and that the all-encompassing connection for all of us, without doubt, is we are human.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing we can change about that, but it is the great connector.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned connection before, and that made me think of feelings, that when people feel something, they're more likely to feel connected. And it's not so up in the mind and intellectual. And like you said, you can get overloaded with that kind of more intellectual stuff.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But I will say this, that with Smart Recovery and very early on in my recovery, those cognitive tools, I had never had them before, and they were pivotal in my recovery. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those tools have become, and I'm going to put a little caveat in here. I try not to use the word tools. I try to use the word practices, because tools suggest brokenness, and I'm not broken.
Okay.
So I like to use practices a lot, but I still will go back and forth between tools and practices. But in my early recovery, those tools were very pivotal because I hadn't really used cognitive tools. And then over the months and the years that I've been on my journey, my recovery journey, those practices, those tools have become kind of unconscious. And so now they're just there. And I guess I've just changed my brain. As those old neural pathways that were kind of destructive for me, they're there, but it's kind of like an old road that's no longer used. And there's just a bunch of nice flowers growing on them.
Yeah.
And now I'm going down this really healthy neural pathway that I've built through my brain. And what a difference that makes. And part of that new neural pathway is I think this subconscious use of the practices, the tools now, and they're just there.
That's wonderful imagery, because we've been talking about the journey and thinking of it as a traveling some distance, and you can decide to exit and go on a different road. Decide to take a different route. What do they call them? The blue highways, when they're less than the interstates, they're less crowded perhaps and less major. So that's wonderful imagery. Thank you for that. As we're starting to wrap up here, Loretta, what do you hope to see this meeting kind of achieve as it continues to develop?
I think my greatest hope for the meeting is recovery for everyone, and that how recovery looks like for everyone is what their journey is. And in our meeting, my hope is that we provide science and behavior to understand that journey, and a safe place to discuss what that journey looks like. As we're experiencing it, we can come into this meeting and we could talk about that. But the two major focuses I always want it to be is science, brain science, and behavioral science, because those to me are the keys to unlocking our whys. And that's why I loved Smart Recovery. And that's why Smart Recovery worked for me, because I needed to understand my whys. And the only way I was going to understand that was with brain science and behavioral science.
Which is not the case in other pathways to recover necessarily. Recovery.
Not necessarily. And we talked about that earlier, that, other recovery modalities work for the people that they work for. But for me, if I ever felt like I was faced with mandates yeah, I did not like that. I don't like to be mandated.
Mm-hmm.
And so smart recovery, it's not a mandate, it's self-management.
Is that a fancy
mandated
term? Is that a fancy term for being told what to do?
I would say so.
Because I don't like being told what to do either.
No. I think that, I'm kind of a Wild West sojourner when it comes to my recovery road. So being told that you have to do this to be successful is like, not really, not for me. I don't see it that way. And so that's why smart recovery worked for me. It was like, what works for you is what works for you, and that will make you successful. And that's what has made me successful. Recognizing what works for me, focusing on that, and wow, what an incredible journey it's been. And, I'm just so grateful to Smart Recovery for getting me on that road.
Yeah. Well, your gratitude is very obvious and very clear. So I love hearing that. And I'm glad you're sharing that with our audience. Anything else as we finish here, Loretta, that you'd like to add about the women's meeting or your own recovery?
I just want to invite anyone who wants to come to our meeting. This is women identify as cisgender, transgender, binary individuals. Please come to the meeting, and you can find the link on the Smart Recovery online meetings page, and it is password protected. So you can find the password in the Women's Forum. And I'd also like to say, please join us in the Women's Forum, because there's a whole lot of connection going on outside of the meeting in the Women's Forum. And so check that out, because some of the connection there is just so wonderful and so supportive. It's sometimes I call the Women's Forum Smart Recovery Support Central, because there's so much going on in there that is so beneficial to everyone. And I just want to invite those to come and join us.
Well, very good. I think that would be a wonderful thing, that people have an option to do, a resource, and a really the way you described what you're doing, what you and others are doing is so positive and productive. I really congratulate you for doing so.
Oh, thanks so much. And I want to encourage others to become facilitators and start their own meetings. If you feel a real passion for something you believe in recovery, and you want to do that, take the training and become a facilitator or a meeting helper. It not only did it help me in my recovery, but it will help others. So I highly recommend and support anyone who wants to do that.
Great. That was Loretta Billingsley. She's a Smart Recovery facilitator. She's been talking with us today on the podcast. Loretta, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks so much. And congratulations to everyone in Smart Recovery. You're doing great, and you're all successful.
Fabulous. Fabulous. If you'd like more information about Smart Recovery, you can visit smartrecovery.org. There you will find links to other podcasts, to YouTube videos, and all kinds of connections to online meetings that you can find. So go there for all your Smart Recovery information. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. I'm Luke Frazier. Until next time, stay healthy and stay connected.